curious. People in the adult entertainment industry, what was your first day on the job like? A bit intimidating, but not really much different. If anything, I had a little better of an idea of what I was doing compared to working at Starbucks. Was a stripper in my late teens. First day I was nervous as fuck. Some drunk dude walks up to the stage waving a dollar bill and said, "Slap your ass, I'll give you $1." Oddly enough, that made me somehow more comfortable with the whole thing. I actually enjoyed it and wasn't half bad. Made more money, legally from 17 to 20 than any other job I had until like 2 years ago. I'm 37 now. Stripped briefly to pay for a semester's worth of tuition and books. On my first day, a lady shouted, "Whip out your pecker!" And I couldn't help but to laugh from both nerves and the fact she said, "pecker." After that, the rest seemed pretty easy. Escort in a brothel. Edit. Escort is a commonly used synonym for all the other words for full-service sex worker where I'm from, making a note as there has been some confusion. Honestly, my first day was a mixed bag. The other girl I worked with was hilarious and properly took me under her wing and fed me a glass of wine before my first John to settle my nerves. I haven't drank on the job since that day, but that one drink really helped. I got tipped by one client, assaulted by another. When I was assaulted, though, the other worker, the receptionist, and my boss all had my back and gave him a proper telling off and barred him. This was a one-off, it hasn't happened since. I've never felt safer in any other job, and I have more control. I walked home that day with more money than I'd earn in a week in my last job. I've never looked back. I'm long retired now, but I was 21 at the time and at a loose end, new city and no job, so decided to work at a gentleman's club as a prostitute. I'd done my research and been in for an interview, so I was feeling confident and relaxed. No one else showed up on time, so I was the only girl there on the day shift and sat chatting to the receptionists. My first client was a really good-looking English Sri Lankan guy who was really sweet and equally nervous. We both couldn't believe it was the other's first time until we were both fumbling and laughing trying to put a condom on correctly. I can't remember who else I saw that day, but I do remember getting paid more than I had earned in a week working 2 jobs. I ended up working for around 7 years and really enjoyed it. I started as a waitress in a strip club. 3 months later, I tried dancing. My first time in the VIP, where I had been seeing the workflow for 3 months, so I knew what to say and where to go. But my hands were shaking. The guy even asked me if I was okay. After that first hour, it was fine, but my body literally was shaking in the beginning. I didn't feel scared, though. It was a natural reaction. Former exotic dancer of 3 years. The first night was intimidating in part because the other dancers are generally hostile toward new girls. That may have just been the case at that club, I'm not sure. But also because the job itself is so heavily stigmatized that you find yourself afraid that somebody you know will see you. That faded after a few weeks, though, and it was actually a really fun job. You should always be careful not to fall into the lifestyle, though. Keep work and personal lives separate. 6.9K, dare I say, nice. Double edit. 6.9 was a 69 reference, hence the nice. Didn't mean to confuse anybody, sorry. Terrifying. I was 21 years old and had never even stepped foot inside a strip club. I had bought a matching bra and underwear set from Marshalls along with regular heels. Big mistake. I was told to watch the dancer before me on stage, who of course was gorgeous and clearly knew what she was doing. I went up there and immediately busted my ass because of the normal-sized heels. The rest of the time was just spent holding onto the pole for dear life and hoping I wouldn't get fired for being the worst dancer they'd ever witnessed. I wasn't fired and eventually got the hang of everything, but I still cringe at how awful those first initial days were. Former male stripper here. It was awesome. It was comedic, sexy and fun. Just an absolute party. The crowd had a blast. We quintuple lap danced the bachelorettes. It didn't pay much, but I wasn't really in it for the money. I would totally start another show if I can make it happen. I only had 2 brief, uncomfortable moments that night. First, an old woman just grabbed my goodies. Second, another old woman shoved $1 so far between my cheeks that I didn't see it until after the show. I'm well out of it now for a good many years, but when I was 16 and homeless, an older gentleman offered me a serious chunk of money for a weekend. He thought I was 14. I was hunger skinny, so it was believable. He had a hotel room, bought me some clean clothes and makeup, and left me alone for a few hours to get the street off of me. When he got back, he threw out my old clothes and took me to dinner. I spent 3 days with him, and none of it was terrible. I wasn't living my best life at the time, so the bar was pretty low. He was polite to me and wasn't rough. He let me drink in the evenings, but never let me get drunk or high, and had me call him Dad in public. He told me it was because it would look odd otherwise, but I called him a normal name that I'm sure wasn't his real name when we were alone, so it didn't feel particularly predatory. I never told him my name, so he called me Anna. We went out during the days, sometimes to eat or shop, once to the zoo, and sometimes I'd stay at the hotel while he went out. He didn't tell me much about himself and his life, lots of old anecdotes from his younger years and silly stories. He liked me to tell him about my life, stupid teenaged garbage about my friends and parents, what kinds of things I liked and why. When we parted, he gave me a bit of cash, but used most of the money we agreed on to get me a motel room for a month. He talked about being worried about how I was living. Beyond the money I earned, he spent a bunch on groceries and toiletries that I didn't see until after he left, so I couldn't thank him. But I felt more cared for by this stranger who paid an underage girl for sex than anybody else in my life. He also extended my stay with management for another 2 weeks. The owner came to my door and told me not to check out yet. Having a room with a lock helped me hugely. I wasn't being robbed anymore, so I could work small jobs and hide cash, and I didn't have to worry about the violence I was trying to avoid before, and I wasn't taking drugs every day because my life didn't disgust me. When my stay ended, I was able to move into a group home and live a bit cleaner and safer, and never did the streets thing again. I did plenty of drugs and drinking, but just for fun and with friends, not to stay warm or stay awake. For context, this was in Canada and was very illegal. Edit. Thanks for the gold. It's never happened before. I don't know what to do. Terrifying. My rent was due soon and I felt there was no other option, so I went straight to Craigslist offering sex. I was well aware of the possibility that I could be putting myself in serious danger, but at the time, getting my rent in on time was my only worry. I was advertising in a murder capital city. I hated it. I hated every man I encountered in sex work afterward, and I try not to think about that time in my life. I assumed that because I was already very promiscuous and used to having sex with strangers that it wouldn't be so bad, but it's so much worse when you can't be picky. There's a reason those kind of men pay for sex. They tend to be creepy and unattractive to the point that buying sex is the only way they can get a woman to look at them. I'm sure I'll get downvoted. Reddit hates when I talk shit about prostitution because everyone has this wonderful, idealized picture of it in their heads, while I spent years drinking heavily just to get the images out of my own head. I ended up going to trade school, and I now have a well-paying, exciting career in factory labor. But I wouldn't trade it for any kind of sex work. I actually enjoy my job. And I get to gladly tell any man that tries hitting on me there to go fuck yourself with an airline. Edit. Removed the news story because it is identifying. Thank you to all those who have given me awards. Also, I understand the flack I'm getting for calling these men unattractive. I have had wonderful, consensual, satisfying sex with many traditionally unattractive men. However, I have no love for my former clients, who I found ugly inside and out. Dancer here. I remember being chill and excited about it. This was 20 years ago. The next few times were a little more nerve-wracking because what does an 18-year-old have to say to middle-aged men, you know? Took me a while to get comfortable. Now I'm a pro and can't wait till the clubs open again. I knew what it would be like going into it. I'd been working for the agency for a few months as a driver, taking the girls to their appointments, making sure they didn't get robber or killed. My boss mentioned that he had had some interest from females wanting a male escort. I'd seen Deuce Bigalow. I figured, why the hell not? I was 18, and I cleaned up pretty nice. My first client was a woman in her late 30s. Not a supermodel, but not unattractive at all. She was in town for some auto parts convention and wanted someone to show her around. We wound up sleeping together after. I got my money and left the next morning. I did that until I moved out of state 3 years later. I'm 21 and was an oil wrestler for a short time just last year, and I was terrified. I had no practice or was shown anything. I made $10 in tips that night, but as it went on for the next 3 weeks, I began making more. The girls were really cliquey and at times total bitches. The men we entertained were disgusting low-hygiene cowboys and rude as fuck. Not my scene, but nothing but respect for the women who are able to have fun in that environment. It was liberating. I was nervous at first, but all smiles afterward. Being a guy, I probably had different experiences. I was awkward-looking even through my early 20s. I decided to become a rent boy when I realized there was a certain subsect of older gay gentlemen who appreciated the way I had aged and carried myself. I did it for about a year or so until I met my husband. All in all, I made some money and walked away feeling better about myself. First job in the industry was a sexting operator for a dating website. I found out it was a scam. I was basically a bot and never got paid for talking to people, lol. They owe me at least $120. I hope their site is exposed one day. Edit. First day was weird. I had to cater to a bunch of random guys. There was no training, just thrown into random chats with random guys. I basically made up nonsense to keep the convo going so they could buy more credits to make the website rich while we get nothing. I was basically the person that was like, "Don't you like talking to me? Why won't you buy more credits then?" Edit 2. Oh, I also forgot to mention. I remember feeling really weird the first day because as bots we had access to a bunch of random women's nudes. They looked like amateur porn stars or something, but I remember being like, who are these women? It just felt wrong. Started at 19. Boyfriend of 3 years dumped me, so I moved to another city and become a hooker. Very first night on the job. It was a quiet night. Didn't get any jobs. My boss, an older man, took me upstairs to one of the rooms, pushed me down onto the bed, and stuck his tongue down my throat. When I told him to stop and that I don't think we should be doing it, he said that I need to get comfortable working eventually. I think he felt bad because he gave me $100 and sent me back downstairs. The next day I had 2 jobs. The first one, my actual first full-service job ever, the dude was so high on coke he came before I even touched him. The second job was the exact same, except we got far enough to put the condom on that time. I was like, damn, I hope it's all going to be that easy. It definitely is not always that easy, but I love it. Edit. I'm being told coke doesn't work that way. I'm sorry, he did it in the room and I saw him do it, so I just assumed that was an affect of it. Sorry for being dumb about it. I was 18 and naive. My first client chose me because I was new. Fresh meat. He was a regular at the club. I was terrified but went along with it. He made me call him Daddy, and every time he pushed into me, I winced from pain. He secretly took the condom off. The manager or girl who gave me an introduction tour never warned me of clients trying to take off condoms. I couldn't tell management about him since he was a regular at the club. They also never told me there was an emergency button to leave the room if I needed to. I only learned 3 years later when a client beat me. That's when I decided it was my last day. I was kicked out, left on my own. It's complicated. At 19. I saw the writing on the wall and needed money fast, so I started as a stripper at 18. The Great Recession happened a few years later, and so I moved to escorting at 22. First job as a dancer was with 2 other girls to a private party. I had something of a debut, and while I had no idea what I was doing, I had my heels on and I knew how to shake my butt. I had literally $200 in singles just rained on top of me. 30 minutes of work. Who knew how much the other girls made? But I was hooked. The economy took a huge downturn a few years later, and so many of my regular hot times were not as prolific. I only worked on call, private parties, bachelor parties, rush week, etc., as I wanted to stay out of a fixed location due. But this would up hurting me in the long run. I turned to escorting through an agency who actually was pretty kind, and I'm still amazed I never had to audition for any of my agencies. He set me up with a John, who was an utter gentleman, kind and considerate, explained his side of things in a way that made sense, and helped me find peace and less of a sense of guilt about what I was doing. I saw him a couple of times, but I think after that my novelty wore off, which is fine. Every once in a while my thoughts float to him and his beautiful golden retrievers. I hope he's living a good life somewhere. I'm pretty sure my life would have went a different way without those two experiences. And don't get me wrong, I've had plenty of just raunchy, awful, ungodly, unforgivable things done and said to me in my career for the sake of rent. But holding on to the few bright moments I had helped me make it through to financial and familial freedom, as well as retirement from the industry. When I started, I was at an agency, so I didn't get to screen people myself or have as much of a role in who I decided to see. My first client was this super quiet, gentle old Asian guy who just wanted a slow blowjob by a pretty girl. Easy peasy. My second client was a completely covered in freckles dude who booked 2 hours and took a Viagra and literally wanted to have crazy hard-pounding sex the whole time. I didn't really know enough to assert myself and be like, nah, brah. But holy shit, I was so worried after that appointment that I'd have to do sessions like that regularly. Thankfully, I've only seen one other person like that, and I wasn't willing to do that the full session. So we parted ways after that appointment, as I knew we weren't a good match. My third client was a super anxious and quiet tech guy who was really nerdy, and I eventually drew that out, and we bonded over it, and he was much more comfortable after that. Most of my friends are nerds since I grew up as a huge nerd, so that was totally in my wheelhouse, and awkward tech nerds have become some of my main bread and butter. I hope I'm helping them be less awkward and more confident over time with other women, and not just myself, but I know for sure I'm helping them get better in bed at least. This was a much more reassuring appointment than Viagra Dude, and I was hoping more appointments would be like that. Fourth client was a super old dude who retired from finance and got a farm, and apparently works his farm every day and had super strong hands and mainly spent the whole session giving me a massage and thanking me for the work that I do. It was so incredibly wholesome and lovely. He also had one of the biggest dicks I've ever seen. Last client ended up being the most representative of what my typical sessions look like and was a nice end to the day. Overall, the whole day put together gave me a nice range of what I might encounter in the industry. iCam. My first time doing it, something happened and my stream was shown on a lot of different places and I had almost 1,000 people show up. I was terrified going into it, but once the money started to get rolling, it felt a lot more natural. Well, I'd like to start by saying, I used to be a male escort at age 15. I looked way older than I was. My first day was a little awkward, but that's because at the time, I was mute. I put up a flyer on Craigslist saying I was a young male mute escort and that I'd message my rates. At first, I was scared. But not because it was my first time, I'm just a very shy introvert. When I got my first message, it was from a much older woman. She looked to be around 50. I told her my rates and we talked about what was going to happen. She was sweet and caring, but she was one of those people you could just tell was lonely. Later that night, I got dressed, we met up at a hotel she had paid for, and we had sex. After that, though, for the rest of the time, we just cuddled, and she talked to me about her day, what's going on in her life, etc. And I just listened. So, all in all, my first day wasn't really bad. I just ended up being more shy than I had wanted to be. The first time ever escorting was not like I planned on. I'm gonna do this. I was propositioned at a club where I was dancing. I couldn't make it in a strip club, was not making more than $100 to $300 a shift, and every girl would brag about making $1,000 to $2,000. I'm like, WTF is wrong, W me. But I needed the deposit for my house and took him up on it. I look back and think, wow, I can't believe he even paid me that much because I was definitely grossed out and unenthusiastic. I was a dancer in my college years. I was so nervous not because of the dancing, but because I was afraid I didn't look as good as the other girls. They wouldn't like me. It turns out they were so sweet and so diverse. One of my co-workers had 5 young kids. One of them was a PhD candidate at one of the local universities. One of them loved to bake in her spare time. Sharing small details like that about our lives made us grow together. Most of the regulars that came in were your average guys. Nothing weird or creepy. Eventually, when you got to know them enough, they would talk about things that stressed them out, like their debt or their job, or my 13-year-old daughter is smoking IDK, what to do, and you'd be more of a listener and advice giver instead of a sexual being. Not the same, but I met someone on a sugar daddy site since I was looking to be with someone who was in more finances than I. I ended up a survivor of repeated sexual assault, so not great. Edit. I have been working with Baltimore police for well over a year, and I believe he was a plant of a trafficking ring. 2 weeks ago, I got the call that the prosecutor will not be charging him. I have had a few trolls come for me. That's fine. I understand some people don't understand emotions and are rather sociopathic like that. But if I can help save another young person, it is worth it. I make TikTok videos about the dangers of online dating and have hundreds of thousands of views from them. People are dangerous, and the vulnerable do get preyed upon. And no cutesy little edgelord comment about deserving a pee and abuse will ever scare me or hurt me like my abuser did. In my early 20s, I did some escorting, gigolo work. I was afraid at what type of women would be willing to pay for sex, and my first client was exactly what I expected. Luckily, she didn't want me to do anything to her and just wanted to give me a blowjob while I fingered her asshole. She was amazing at it, BTW. My second client that day, however, wow. She was a legit 8 out of 10. She was a taller, 20-pound heavier version of Maria Menounos. You name it, she wanted to do it. She actually ended up being a repeat customer. Numerous times we would get together, and when all was said and done, was my best and most frequent client. She was extremely wealthy and just loved the idea of paying a man other than her husband to do the things we were doing. I did phone sex for a bit, and the first day was awkward. I felt like I was in a corny porno from the 80s. There were also a surprisingly high number of men that asked which area I lived in and were weirdly insisting on knowing. I'm guessing BC it was over the phone, it felt more real to them. After a couple of hours, I got into my role and moaning like a bad actress became easier and funnier, but the first hours definitely felt awkward. My first porn shoot was fine. I went in, I'd paid a makeup artist, so I got that done first. I shot 2 solo scenes, got my money and went home. Then I ate fried chicken because I'd been fasting. It was amazing.
Serious. People who've had unexpected relationships with their SO ex-friend's parent. How did it happen and what came next? I had sex with one of my best friend's mom. It was Thanksgiving, and I was driving her back home, and she confessed that she didn't have sex in years since she was a widow. I told her that I didn't have sex in months since I was moving. We talked a bit more and we sort of flirted, and once we got to her house, she asked me to come inside and we did the deed. Edit. I accidentally put dead instead of deed at the very end. That's my mistake. I did not fuck a dead body. I am not into that shit. A friend of mine's mom basically hit on a number of us in the group, and sadly it just became kind of a matter of time before one of us caved, and it eventually happened. He saw it coming, I feel bad for him. Recently divorced, mid-30s, hot mom, and a group of 18-year-olds. It wasn't me who did it. I'm on mobile, so apologies for the formatting. I was at a friend's birthday party. My friend was in her mid-20s, I was 30. Her mom was in her early 50s. She and her mom took really good care of me after my father passed. They made sure I was eating and that I actually left the apartment every day, as I was prone to just sit around being a depressed, sad sack. Friend's mom and I used to get stoned together. So when we were at her daughter's birthday party at her mom's house, she called me to her room so we could smoke a joint. She didn't want to do it in front of everyone, and it definitely wasn't the first time we'd gotten a little high together. So it was somewhat familiar territory. Maybe it was the weed or the wine or both, but as we're smoking and chatting, I just leaned in and kissed her. To my surprise, she kissed me back, and we proceeded to make out like a couple of horny teenagers on the love seat in her bedroom. She stopped for a moment, looked at me and said, "Well, had I known you were interested, we could have done this a long time ago." We made out a little more, and I told her that we should stop because we're going to get caught. So we kissed and groped one another a little more and returned to the party. The next day, she stopped by my apartment to see how I was doing, which wasn't uncommon. That day was slightly different. She was always a very good-looking woman, but that day, she had more carefully applied makeup, some nice-looking earrings, and a blouse that showed off more cleavage than usual. I invited her in, and we were off to the races. We both had a great time, but I thought of my friend and said that we probably shouldn't do this again. She didn't really respond to it, and we continued to cuddle for a while. The next day, she called me and said that she thought she may have lost her earring on my bed or my couch, which I thought was BS. But it turns out that the earring was indeed in between the cushions of my couch. She came over to retrieve it, and we went at it again, and again, and again. This went on for months until I finally was moving out of state. It never happened again, we never spoke of it, and my friend never found out. Sadly, my friend's mom passed 5 years ago. I'd thought about telling her, but it just seemed like a bad idea. RIP Julie. You were smoking hot and just an all-around great woman. Edit. Wow, I had no idea this would get so much attention. Thanks for all the upvotes. When I was 20, I got accepted to university in Canada. I'm a French guy. And my mom put together a BBQ to celebrate it with my best friends, among which was my actual best friend, girl my age, who lived far so she would stay the night. My mom and dad were already getting divorced and sleeping in separate rooms back then, so there was no doubt they will ever get back to normalcy in terms of their relationship. After most people left, and I was drunking my way around talking about Canada with another friend, my now former best friend, and my dad made sure my mom went to bed and carried on drinking together. All I remember after is me trying to figure out where the hell my friend was in the morning as the guest room was empty. It took so much fighting denial to realize she had been sleeping with my dad all night. Mom was destroyed, so was I. They both denied it and said they just talked. I still cannot believe this happened, but with retrospective, my dad has been such a crap dad to his kids and wife, and that friend has not been nice to me either. Edit. Wow, I did not expect this story to go that far. Thank you for the awards and the heartwarming comments. First time sharing something that personal so publicly, but I am glad I did. I hooked up with my student's mom. I was teaching an after-school program, so I saw her almost every week at pickup. Sometimes her husband would pick up. Yes, she was married. And we would talk a lot to the point that we became friendly. Well, I was going through a divorce and happened to bring that up one time, and she very quickly gave me her phone number, put her hands on me. She was not being shy about it. Something like out of a movie. Next time I saw her, she asked me out to lunch, and I said sure. We met up, had lunch, she paid, and she went on to tell me about how her and her husband were not sexually involved with each other, and they were free to see other people. We went back to my place and the sex was wild. That was the only time we hooked up though, as I started dating someone shortly thereafter. Her kid was one of those, "I'll fuck your mom" Xbox Live kids, so I would just chuckle to myself when I saw him. I had sex with a good friend's mom. Looking back, it's really messed up. She had been working on me for months. I was only 18. I'm ashamed of it. Fortunately, the friend never found out. But as an adult, I now look back at it and realize that I was in over my head and she should have known better. Edit. Wow, everyone. I appreciate the sympathy. Let me just tell you a little more so you don't worry about me. Was I groomed? Maybe looking back, I was. But I was certainly no virgin. The reason I feel ashamed of it is because it was my friend's mom. I could have had her any time and she offered pretty often. So one night, I decided to take her up on it. This doesn't affect me today, probably never did in any deep way, except feeling like crap because it was a betrayal of my friend. But as an adult, I find her decisions disgusting. And as an adult, I realize that my 18-year-old self didn't know anything about life and rarely thought of anything beyond getting laid. I'm not hard on myself about it these days, but I was for several years. one of my first girlfriends in high school. Her mom used to seriously tell her that she should give me her virginity, often. Then Mom started flirting with me. One day while at their house, Mom grabbed me in the hallway and kissed me. After we split up, Mom used to still call me every now and then. One time asked if I wanted to come over and hang out. I did, and Mom got my virginity. Well, I was a horny guy, and my friend's mom was, well, available, really. I'm not proud of it, it just kind of happened sometimes, and every time I felt shame. I don't know, like I was betraying my friend's trust? Worst thing was, she was actually a friend of my mom too, so I kind of saw her on a regular basis. A friend at school's mom was pretty hot. She was relatively young compared to most of our mums, and his dad was quite a bit older and absolutely minted. When we were young teenagers, it was a bit of a running joke to give him shit about his hot mom, or how his dad was her sugar daddy. Fast forward to the end of 6th form, end of high school for US readers, when we were all 18 and he was having a party at his massive house to celebrate. Most people were outside getting drunk in the garden, but I'd had a bad few months, family stuff, so wasn't really feeling it. I decided to go and chill inside for a bit, and in the kitchen I found his mum just drinking wine and looking forlornly out the window. I asked if she was okay, and she pretty much unloaded her issues. She was miserable, she hated his dad, she'd settled down without having a life first, felt trapped because she couldn't afford to leave, loved her kids, etc. I opened up about my issues too with my family, and it actually felt good to talk to a relative stranger about it. I now realize I should have been seeing a therapist. Anyway, one thing led to another, and she started making out with me. I didn't stop her. She then led me upstairs, and the rest is history. On the one hand, it was pretty awesome. She was smoking hot, I was pretty inexperienced, and she really knew how to communicate in the bedroom. On the other hand, though, I knew I was betraying my friend and fucking up his parents' marriage, plus I could hear all my friends laughing and partying outside. A few months later, they got divorced, and I understand she got a bit shafted in the deal because she'd cheated on him. I don't know if that was me or she did it with someone else too. I am pretty ashamed about it, but I also realized she was using me too. I was never under any illusion we had some special connection or anything, but I can see she just wanted to fuck someone out of catharsis or frustration, and maybe, subconsciously, to force the problems in the marriage into the daylight so she could finally get out. TL, doctor. Friend's mom was hot but miserable in her marriage. Fucked 18-year-old me at a party to feel younger, and probably to sabotage her marriage. This reminds me of the mom of my cousin's wife. When her kids were younger, they used to bring home kids from school that had it really rough in their life. She would talk with them and help them. But one thing that was interesting she mentioned was that she was glad to have parents around who would initiate physical contact with them. She said she knew these youngsters needed physical contact since some of them had been feeling lonely or mistreated for a while, but she said she couldn't be the one giving it to them. Now reading these comments, I understand what she meant by that. I slept with my friend's mother. At a music fest, was very high on acid. We were all hanging out, me, my two friends who were dating, we'll call them David and Claire's mother. Claire doesn't feel too hot, so David takes her back to the campsite and me and her mother are just left to the festival. We get some drinks in, do some dancing, one thing leads to another, and yeah. Afterwards, we just sort of chilled in my tent for a few hours before hitting the party tent, having a wee cuddle. Claire actually walked in on us after we had finished, and I was so high I didn't even really know what was happening. I just knew that I had done something very wrong. So the festival ends and we all go home, and of course the sensible thing to do would have been to try patch things up with Claire and never talk to her mother again. You will find, however, that I am not a sensible man and proceeded to not only see her again, but date her on and off for 4 years. I have so many stories about those 4 years. I slept with a childhood friend's dad while visiting my hometown. Long story short, he's bi and divorced, and I was browsing on a gay hookup app. It's a small countryside town, so the only things to do are ketamine, sex, or leave. He messages me, and he clearly doesn't recognize me because I don't look the same as I did a decade ago. I recognize him, and the entire time I'm thinking, this is really weird. But I'm bored, and he's relatively handsome and charming, as far as charming goes on Grindr LOL. So I figure, hey, why not? And hindsight is 20/20 because the sex was fun. But the entire time I'm thinking, this is my friend's dad. He has literally driven me to school before. just left an overall odd feeling. My friend doesn't know, and it's going to stay that way because we don't really talk whatsoever now, and it'd be weird to just pop up like, "Your dad jackhammered my prostate," and it was kind of weird. A good friend of mine had this happen to her back in high school. She caught her, also high school-aged boyfriend, sexting her 40-something-year-old mother, and it led to her mom and her stepdad's divorce. All while she was 17 years old. She still has a strained relationship with her mom to this day. We are 25 now, so this happened almost 10 years ago. I don't think you can ever get over that kind of betrayal by your own mother. I believe she still has a good relationship with her, now ex, stepdad though. Her mom is now dating a man her age, but she will always be a predator in my eyes that seduces her daughter's boyfriend. So gross. My first serious girlfriend's mom used to text me every day after me and her daughter broke up. Just friendly stuff at first. Talking about music and other mutual interests, and I used her to keep tabs on what my ex was doing, because I was dumb 16-year-old kid. Eventually, it led to her telling me how much I reminded her of her high school boyfriend that killed himself, and she went on to tell me she lost her virginity to him, and how much she loved him. Then things took a turn. She started sending very sexual texts, which turned into nudes and phone sex and plans to hook up. Eventually, I ended up walking away from it all before anything really happened. I didn't think much of it back then, but looking back at it now, I was a 16-year-old heartbroken boy and she was a 40-year-old married woman. So that's pretty fucked up to think about now. Basically groomed and taken advantage of by someone I thought was my friend. Edit. This is actually my first time sharing this with anyone, so thank you for hearing my story. My brother's best friend from high school dated my mom in his 30s. She had my brother really young, when she was barely 15. So when his friend was in his 30s, she wasn't yet 50. I will always remember the night he found out. They fought, and my brother's friend left the house and got into his car. My brother followed him out and punched him in the head through the driver's side window. He managed to go through the window and still connect with enough force to knock him out cold. I got super fucking drunk at the friend's mother's house, we all did really, but mainly me and the mum. But I'd come as my friend was going through a bit of a tough time, and it was supposed to be a nice surprise. My friend was going to her mum's for a nice night of merriment, and the mum told me I should come to cheer her up, which I agreed was a good idea. Everything started out fine, but as she and I got more drunk, we started kind of flirting. Something that had actually happened before when we were both drunk. Then, when it was time for everyone to go to bed, I snuck into her mum's room. My friend totally knew, a fact I wasn't aware of until a little while after, but her mum then had to drive me to the train station to go home the next day. What happened after is I, like a complete coward, never apologized, even after I found out my friend knew, and I lost that friend. They deleted me from social media and didn't speak to me for almost 2 years. We did recently reconcile. I sent a long text a couple of months back apologizing and letting my friend know how much I missed them. They then recently reached out because they found out I'm expecting my first baby. I'm very happy to be back in contact with this friend. Tip for everyone, don't sleep with your friend's parents. It's a dick move. But should that ever happen and you want to keep this friend a friend, own up, apologize, and then give them space. The truth is always better than a lie, and your honesty and apology will be appreciated. Friend's mom going through some tough times with her husband accidentally added one of our friends on Facebook. She started flirting with him, and eventually they fucked. After this kept going on for a couple of months, dude decided to tell his friend, son, about it at his house. The son cried, they threw hands at each other and everything was all right moments later. Don't really know what happened after that, lost contact with both of them. In my late 20s, I had a friend in a small mountain town in the western US. His mom gets separated, moves in with him. She's mildly flirtatious with me, no big deal. Not enough to raise any red flags. Job changes and I move to the city, 90 miles south. He comes on weekends to party a few times, normal stuff. Then he comes to party and brings her. At her request, we have a late-night fuckfest while he's passed out in the next room. Major violation of bro code by me, but she asked nicely. No surprise we weren't friends after that. My coworker that I slept with set me up with her mom. This is kind of an awkward one. I helped a coworker move. After all that was said and done, we had a drink and got to talking. She ended up blowing me and we hooked up to fuck a couple times after. We ended up just stopping and had almost no contact for about a year or so after. I made a satirical post on Facebook about the dating pool being, quote, a pond of acid full of robot piranha with lava for piss. And she messages me saying her mom was looking for a guy. I figure, okay, fuck it. Why not? I like cougars. I start talking to her mom, we sorta hit it off, and she asked me to come over. I had no idea my former coworker lived with her. So, awkward. After a couple hours of hanging out, her mom invites me into the bedroom. Still awkward. Next thing I know, I'm fucking her mom while she's out in the other room watching TV. It never stopped being awkward. There was even one time when the coworker knocked on the door and said something to the extent of, I want to turn with him when you're done, which her mom said something like, fuck you, find your own cock to suck. Did I mention this was really fucking awkward? That was sort of the defining moment where I knew I needed to just nope on out of there. Edit. I forgot to add the aftermath. I ended up getting a serious girlfriend, so it broke off. When we broke up, coworker and mom both tried to get in my pants shortly after. I didn't want to get into that mess again, so I ended up just ghosting them. I checked in on them both a couple years later. Coworker got married, mom moved out of state, but they're both doing well last I knew. My mom had a friend, and I was friends with her son. I had turned 16 in November and went to their house for a party over Christmas. I got drunk and passed out on the couch in the living room. I woke up to the house empty, apart from my friend's mom sucking my dick. That turned into a relationship for about 18 months. One afternoon, my mom is telling me how shit I am and how none of my friends can be trusted, so I asked her if she could trust all her friends. When she says yeah, I asked, even Margaret? And then the truth came out. Most of truths anyway. Never spoke to my friend again, but I did have to fight some drug dealer friends of his. Apparently, Margaret came round to my mom's house the day after and got a mouthful of abuse. I don't know what was said, but I'll guarantee that it was more about the breach of trust between her and my mom, and less about the sexual assault. My mom has never really forgiven me for it. BTW, I'm UK, and age of consent over here is 16. My best friend was dating this chick and having sex with her, and when she fell asleep, he would sex her mom up. Until one day his GF found out and the mom and daughter fought. It was almost like Jerry Springer. Interesting that the top 20 or so comments are younger male with older female, and one older male. Is that really that much more common? Or is it more that young men like to brag about it while a woman feels shame for hooking up with a dad? Good God, the US is just waking up and the amount of predatory moms from the UK already is disturbing. Edit. Thanks for my first award, stranger. My sister was talking this one kid I didn't really care for, and ended up working with him at the job I was managing at. There was a woman working in a different area. At that same job, I ended up having a one-night stand with her after we had been flirting a bit here and there. Come to find out later, that was the dude's mom. My sister would then use this as a comeback and say, well, your mom sucked off my bro. Was a weird time several years ago, all kind of moved away after a bit. Nothing much outside of that happened. Serious. From personal experience, what are the signs your partner is cheating? I got mailed a wedding invitation by his fiancée of 4 years that I had thought was just a good friend of his. That was not only a clear-cut sign he was cheating, but that I was the other woman and in second place. Being edgy or secretive about their phone calls. Keeping their phone on silent. Sudden increase in grooming, yet your new clothes, may be irrelevant for certain personalities. Being overly irritable with you for no reason. Lack of interest in sex with you. A general feeling of becoming more distant. Being out of the house more often than normal. Going through a lot of money and not telling you where it's going. Accusing you of cheating. Going outside for phone calls and hanging up. If you follow Mott, being very overprotective about who you hang out with. Finding them snooping through all your stuff. In my defense, I was in my early 20s, only my second long-term relationship. I should have seen these as giant red flags, but yeah, lesson learned. Edit. Yep, I do know this isn't 100% a solid test for fidelity. Yep, you could point out any one of these signs, and by itself it doesn't mean cheating. Yes, some people are just private people. It's more important if these things listed are changes from the norm. This is just what I noticed from personal experience. The more boxes get ticked, the more concerned I would be personally. My dad wasn't my partner, but I busted him for cheating on my mother when I suspected that him talking on the phone in the driveway for a half hour each night after she went to bed was not business related. I don't even know if I should have done that. The marriage ended. One of the things I'm not seeing listed here, and a lot of these are pretty good, is if you haven't changed your behavior at all, but suddenly they are paranoid accusing about you cheating. One of the things I'm not seeing listed here, and a lot of these are pretty good, is if you haven't changed your behavior at all, but suddenly they are paranoid accusing about you cheating. Every relationship I had that ended because I found out they were cheating had one common denominator. They frequently accused me of cheating, like all the time. I have never cheated. For example, my last ex accused me of making plans to go cheat on them with an actor from TV. I didn't even know the actor's real name, I just thought the actor was cute. Cue huge fight. Find out later they've been cheating on me with just a friend, don't worry. 5 years later, the ridiculousness of it still strikes me from time to time. All these out-of-character signs occurring at the same time was what alerted me to his cheating. Suddenly starts having a passcode on his phone and gets agitated if you accidentally see his screen whilst he's using his phone. Says he's coming home at a certain time, then shows up 9 hours later with no explanation and gets agitated when asked. Starts gaslighting, manipulating, screaming, compulsive lying, and verbally abusing on a daily basis. Starts going to the gym daily even after a 12-hour work shift that involves hard labor. Starts being distant and refusing to communicate, screams at you that he doesn't want to talk at all, not even about the weather. All his friends, none who know me personally, start hating me out of nowhere, speaking ill of me to my face and behind my back, and wishing that I die. Starts to make future plans including overseas trips that don't involve me. Starts becoming obsessed with pornography despite being strictly religious all his life. Starts eyeing off other women in public in front of me. Starts comparing me to other women and threatening me with other women. Starts getting physically abusive upon seeing me upset about his above actions. Turns out, it was revealed that he was on dating sites and was planning to send me over 700 kilometers away interstate against my will and pursue a relationship with another woman in his city and send me money weekly and visit me on weekends to keep up the facade of a marriage. Yes, this man was my husband. Now, ex, advice to everyone out there. You can never change someone who sees no wrong in their actions. How someone treats you is a reflection of who they are. He stopped pressuring me for sex. I was young and naive and didn't feel ready. Turns out he wasn't going to wait. Long periods of time in which you cannot account for their whereabouts. And when they do tell you where they have been, they tell you a detailed story in which they progressively fill in the details because it is a lie. Sad. Lying about where they are. I think in my life I am 5-1 in this category. 6 times in my life a SO has lied about where they were. 5 times they were cheating. The other time, they were picking out a Valentine's gift for me. When my ex-husband cheated on me, he just seemed to work a lot more, and during periods where it was phone online, only he wouldn't let me say no to sex. It was no longer an option. Also, everything I did was wrong or awful or stupid, and I was the crazy, lazy bitch. He never did wrong. Although that could have been more down to his personality than the cheating. Fearful of any lasting evidence of the relationship. I was with someone for many years and was blissfully unaware she had been cheating on me for an extended time. A number of months before she left me for one of her other guys, she stopped wanting to take pictures of us together. This was in the days of film cameras, and I didn't pick up on this sudden change in behavior because I hate having my picture taken and thought she was finally respecting my opinion, as well as saving a lot of money. Despite that, I suggested we get a portrait done of us together, as I was planning on asking her to marry me, and thought it would be nice to have. I still clearly remember her telling me she thought it wasn't a good idea because, what if we ever split up? It blew my mind, but I had some horrible stuff going on in my life that was distracting me. After she broke up with me, she told any mutual acquaintances that we'd been together for only a year, not almost 6 as we really had been, and pointed to a lack of pictures as proof I was a crazy ex obsessed with her. It never occurred to her that people who knew us all those years would be willing to say that we had been together for years, or that I still had pictures from our years together. Also, she started asking me if I would date this person or that person, and letting me know if she approved of the choices. Apparently, she planned to control my dating life after she dumped me, but that's a tale for another thread. Signs I knew was she was being a little more distant. We had this among connection, and about the time she went to a friend's birthday party was about the same time she started being distant. I chopped it up to being just past the honeymoon phase. Another was she suddenly had a lot of little events come up. She was usually a stay-at-home play games type of person that suddenly wanted to go out for a bit with friends or had to visit family, which she never did so subtly in changes of plans. Lastly was a little scummy, but being suspicious will do that to a person. She will add 2-3 guys every day on Facebook around her area. And one empatticure. I didn't care for it, seemed like her type, so to speak. And my gut was right because a few days later I got a call from her father telling me she went out on a date with this guy who was a city over and she was dressed to impress. Broke my heart, but I have profound respect for that man. Fun topic. From my intuition and experience, less intimacy compliments you way less or way more due to guilt, cover-up. But either way, much less interested in everything about you. Vague or way too detailed answers to questions like, where have you been? Changes the style of text, use of words, taste in clothes and music. Always on the phone. Leaves the stuff like some jewelry that you gave them that they used to wear 24/7 in the house. This is where I started suspecting my ex-BIL cheating on my assisee. In my previous relationship, I was passing her phone to her and it was unlocked and her messenger app was open. I glanced at the screen but noticed a message from a guy that had XX at the end. She would barely send X's to me, never mind anyone else. So I immediately went, wait a second. She got annoyed at me, without me having to say what I was referring to, she knew, saying, if you really think I'm cheating, just leave, whilst going into the bathroom. Personal experience. If someone is extremely possessive or keeps bringing up what would happen if their partner cheated or just seems overly bent out of shape about cheating, they're probably a cheater. This couple I know, sweetest girl I've ever met, extremely nice, very loyal. She was honestly head over heels for her husband even after years of marriage. It was genuinely one of those things that made me want a relationship. I wanted someone to love me that much. The guy would always say things like, if you cheated on me, it would destroy me. Harmless at first. But he said it weakly. He knew her phone password and convinced her that he was always, at any time, allowed to look at her phone, to flip through her texts and pictures. If she ever changed her password to anything, he had to know immediately. Facebook, emails, phones. History must never be cleaned on the computer. Things like that. When she was talking with me to plan his surprise party, we were using code words and she was too suspicious about it, and he went through our messages thinking we were fooling around behind his back. He made her cut contact with me to prove that we weren't. I wasn't allowed to talk to her, visit, call, text, email, or even use Facebook. I let it go because, well, the only option was to let it go or get mad and make things worse. 4 months later, she called me. He told her he lost his phone and wanted to get a new one, so he got a new phone, new number, new plan. Said he'd cancel the other one. He even told her, as show of trust, he would let her root through his phone whenever she wanted as well. His new phone, of course. She was cleaning one day and found his old phone. She was about to bring it to him and show him, but her alarms went off, so she went through it first. Password protected. But same password for his new phone. She got in. Yup, he'd been cheating for a while, absolutely destroyed her. So, if they are so incredibly defensive about cheating, they themselves might be guilty of it and are thinking, if I cheated, my partner might cheat. Drip feeding, i.e., when something originally innocuous gradually turns out to be less and less so. I was out with the girls, I was out with a mixed group. Actually, it was Dave and his mates. Actually, it was just Dave. Actually, we weren't out, we were at his... Nothing happened. Okay, we kissed. Okay, we slept together, but it was just once. Okay, I've been fucking him for a year. Obviously, it's obvious by the end, but the lesson is that by the second drip, You can tell something is up, and it's going to turn out much worse. There are never only two drips. When they say you don't have to worry about that guy, girls start worrying. Her phone was in her hand constantly. I once stood up and walked past her to see what she was typing. It was this. Looks nice, like you. They had started to hang out a lot, going for long dog walks, going to the opera, going for dinner. She also started to be vile towards me and pick arguments out of nowhere. She had been saying things like, "Don't you think T is hot? What would you do if we had an affair?" She had stopped showing any interest in me whatsoever. She had cheated on her last girlfriend several times, and I have no doubt that she had cheated on me more than once during our time together. Yeah, lesson learned. I have cheated. I was married for 5 years and have learned so much since then. I ended up leaving a wonderful person for a new, wonderful person, and after much hurt, forgiveness, and growth, I am very blessed with an incredible family. Here are some signs. ISM male. Working late with vague or flippant explanation. Wouldn't your spouse want to be detailed if you probed? Note: I cheated with someone at work. Hiding or being very careful with my phone and laptop. Having a confidant that isn't you. Unusual or sudden disinterest in intimacy. Disinterest in long-term plans. Feel free to ask questions. You can tell by body language and tone. A real easy one is they come home and immediately hit the shower, but it's not hot, and they didn't hit the gym or done anything strenuous. The fact that you are asking this question is a good sign. For me, I could tell he was growing increasingly distant. He would tell me I wasn't putting the effort into our relationship, but when I tried to be more attentive and loving, he would withdraw. And then, one awesome night, I asked him if there was someone else. He had a panic attack which left him unable to breathe, and I and his uncle rushed him to the ER. For 2 weeks after, he would send me pictures of the toll the attack had taken on his eyes and skin. I felt like a monster. It turned out that I had just hit the nail on the head and unnerved him. The worst part is that his whole family knew and had been helping him hide it, because they thought I was an awful person due to some lies he had been feeding them. His uncle was paying for the secret cell phone. Everyone was encouraging him to leave me for her, not knowing I had been paying the majority of the household expenses and had been doing everything I could think of to make him happy. He also engaged in some horrible mind games, including disappearing with a gun to make me think he'd gone off to kill himself. There's more, but that is easily the most traumatizing of the lot. When I found out and asked why, he said, I just didn't love him enough. They talk about that person a lot. They go to see them when they said they couldn't be out that night. They put that person over you. She's sitting around on her phone, and when you sit next to her, she immediately changes positions so you can't see her screen. From personal experience, she started getting weirdly jealous for no reason and began accusing me of cheating on her. It was so out of place, and after a few arguments with her, it was obvious to me what was happening. So I waited until everything was just normal and calm, and I sat her down and asked her how long she had been cheating on me. She tried to deny it one time, and I just told her to stop lying and try the truth. She started crying immediately. I just stayed calm and told her that we couldn't be together anymore, but there was no point in either of us getting angry and fighting. That was pretty much it. We broke up and she moved out. Blaming you for cheating. Blaming you for thinking about cheating, Giselle being attracted to others. Frequent disengagement from familiar intimacy. Conspicuously withholding details about recent events. Less eye contact. Also new sex techniques. EW edit. Source: have cheated and been cheated on. Sudden, unexplained changes in 1. Phone usage. 2. Hygiene, grooming, and personal fitness. 3. Intimacy. 4. Spending habits. 5. General mood. It's the inexplicable nature of changes that's a real indication, though. All of these things could be impacted by something like someone starting a new job. It's when there's no apparent reason, or they're cagey about the reason, that it becomes suspect. I've noticed people who cheat tend to assume and get aggressive about the idea of cheating towards their SO. Their inner guilt starts to come out. My high school boyfriend never saved phone numbers into his phone. He claimed he was just too lazy. Turns out the unsaved numbers belong to his many, many side girls. I think a lot of these responses are subjective, but basically boil down to this. Be aware of uncharacteristic changes in their behavior. Has your partner had a lock on their phone since day one? Probably not something to worry about. Have they not had a password on their phone and all of a sudden, for seemingly no reason, they do? Probably something to worry about. From personal experience as the cheater, I have to disagree with some of these people. A sudden increase in sexual desire towards you. Having a new sexual partner makes you feel sexier and hornier. They might be getting it from someone else, but out of guilt and convenience, they'll likely be more sexual towards you as well, in ways they weren't before. Here's the red flag I had. Her parents were quite well off and always gave us the best Xmas gifts. One Xmas, she got the usual lavish stuff. I got barely a thing, and what I did get was really thoughtless. 2 days later, I discovered she was cheating with my best friend. Her parents knew. I had been dating a girl for 3 years, and we had just moved in together when she decided to cheat. We both drank way too much at the time, liked to drink a lot, and we would often go out or go to parties with mutual friends at her request. After about 3 months in our new place, I broke my foot, crashed racing motocross. I didn't want to go out and hobble around, and that's when I noticed changes in her behavior. Anyway, what I noticed was, she no longer wanted to spend time at home with me like we used to, watch TV together after work, play video games, etc. Started getting rides with a mutual male friend of ours, Matt, to parties, or to hang out with other PPL every day after work. Asked her, and said I was worried about Matt and her spending so much time together. She gave me the classic "we are just friends, you're being paranoid," etc. Since we used to go out together a lot, I rationalized it away. Began to constantly text way more than usual while around me, ignoring me when we were hanging out, and being very careful to always keep her phone out of my reach, where I can't read over her shoulder. Sex life went from 3 to 5 times a week to like once per month, and only when I begged her for it for hours. Once the sex if dropped off, I pretty much suspected she was cheating. Till then, I always found a way to rationalize her behavior, or blamed myself and my foot. So I was fed up with all my suspicions one night, and after she got home, way after she said she would be home, I pretended to be asleep in bed, while she proceeded to drunkenly pass the fuck out. So I went to her nightstand and looked for her phone, opened it, didn't have a password, and was treated to weeks of text logs between her and Matt. "When can I see you again? I love you, blah blah blah." So then I woke her up, confronted her with her phone. She broke down, saying I was the one she really wanted. Told her to GTFO of our room and sleep on the couch. We continued to live together for a few months until she decided to move in with her dad in a different state after not being able to get her own place. Anyway, that's my story. Thanks for reading, Internet Strangers. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe for more stories like these. And of course, we'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below and share your experiences or opinions. See you in the next one.